Hi everyone, I want to take you through the car project a little more slowly and explain how I put it together to give a different perspective. So here's the completed car. A couple notes: this does take time and it's using the T-spline environment in a way it's hard to tell you a step, here's A, B, C, how to do it. So it's a matter of going through and spending some time and getting the T-spline body to work the way you'd like to. That being said, there's a finite amount of time, so I'd recommend deciding how much time you can put towards this and spending on that and seeing what kind of results you can get. And it's a feeling thing. Once you crack that egg and you can feel how the T-spline starts to work, you can start to make these car bodies and in turn model about anything you can imagine. So let's go through this process. I'm going to go back. So I started by linking in the car body interior. You notice I did move the wheels for this project off a little bit from where they were. The guides to get it to fit the concept. Then I added in some images, and I use these as guides. I use a Mercedes SLA, so if you want to use this car, Mercedes SLA class. Obviously that's a sedan, doesn't quite fit, so I actually had to move it around a little bit to turn it into a roadster concept. And then I modeled a T-spline body. And let me turn off some of the other parts. You notice I'm working only with surfaces for this project. No need to make solids for the most part. So step one, let me go back to the edit form so you can see this. Step one is to create as simple a T-spline body as I can. You start simple because you're going to add complexity later. So this T-spline body is where I started with. I started with a flat plane, you can see it here, and then I added faces, so this row here, then I brought it down over the nose, then I used the Alt to add this row here, Alt and drag, and then I use Alt and drag just on this edge right here. So that was this whole edge. I selected Alt to drag it down, I shaped it up, then I grabbed this edge here and dragged that down. The important part was having enough faces that could get around the wheel, so two in the front, one over the top, and one next to it. That would apply to all of you. So you need 1, 2, 3, 4 faces to get around the wheel. Once you get this far, I use this edge and Alt and drag to drag out each step. So 1, 2, and this applies to probably everybody as well. You need at least 3 faces here. I did 4, maybe a little bit too much, but at least 3 minimum. That gets you to here. Then you can use Alt to go over the wheel one time, and then you can use Alt to grab this to grab the back of the car, pull that out. Again, using the Alt and the edit form. And then I use Alt to grab this edge, always grabbing an edge, dragging that down here, and then there. And then obviously I've shaped it a little bit more than that to get it all to fit as a roadster. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is to shape that. Now you might want to, I did this so I could show you what I did, but you might want to go ahead and do that as well. You just right click, copy, and then paste. That way if it gets tangled up, you can at least go back to step 1, because in the T-spline environment you don't have the parametrics. You can just undo or redo. So I recommend making a copy like that, could save you. So here I've shaped this and obviously added more T-splines. This is the part that's hard to describe. It's hard to do until you get the feeling, but remember that the closer these lines are together, it makes a pinch. You get these body pinches. And it's important to think ahead of time what you're going to do. Obviously I use these guides for the SLA. I didn't make an SLA exactly, but I used it as a guide to get the proportions of a car and some of the styling that I wanted. So for these, you add some extra lines. The other thing to remember is that you can pinch these together. T-splines don't have to go all the way like a NURBS model, so you can actually stop it somewhere, and that line will then fade up into the other series of lines. And then always, of course, doing four-sided. That takes some thought and practice. Another thing you can do is delete. If something's not working, delete a couple lines or a section and put it back in to get this. Now this did take time. I spent about 20 hours on this model, and I know you don't all have that time, but spend the time you can. Block something out and see if you can get the car to work the way you'd like to. You can see also on the hood, I wanted some really tight little pinches, so I've got a couple extra lines here. I also often go into visual style shaded, where I'm just looking at the T-spline body. You can still move some of these around, and you can see the effect as you do that. It's more about sculpting and less about where the lines actually are. So try to do that. Alright, then step 3, turn that on. I've added the windshield here. That's actually kind of tough to do. You have to grab these edges, hold Alt and drag them up, and then manipulate these into a windshield. Now you notice a lot of the other car models out there, they don't do that. They would actually do several different bodies. A windshield would be a separate piece. That's a lot simpler. So that's what I recommend, but you can try this if you've got more time to make that work. And then with that, I modeled in the windshield. That's just a plane that's brought into place. And my step 4 model here, it's all detailed out. You notice it's all smooth body. I don't have any of the car inlets yet. That happens later. So then I start to model all these cutouts, and these are done with another T-spline. I started with a sketch, so you'll see in my model I've got sketches here that define the different cutouts, and then I use the extrude tool. So all these sketches here. These are to help me guide the wheels, tail lights. Here's some of the headlights. So here's that front grille sketch. So you can see I did a sketch, then I did an extrude, and brought it in. Now I'm trying to be pretty careful to do this on certain faces, so you'll see me be really careful as I go along and do these. So all the grille, the lights. Now you can just use the sketch and do split face later on. The cool thing about using a T-spline instead of a sketch is you can manipulate this further. So if your sketch had this like this and you don't like that, it's not lining up, you can manipulate this. You can even pull this out. It doesn't have to be straight on. You can start to do angles. So that's why you use the T-spline surfaces versus just a sketch for these openings. Then I do all the ones in the back for the bumper and the grille. This is the tonneau cover, so I put that in. Just a simple model. Doesn't connect to the other model, it's just there. You notice I took these edges around the top and did an Alt and drug them down, so I have interior sides since I'm doing a roadster concept. Have some sort of interior to the car. So all these shapes in here get modeled. Now these extra shapes, they're hard to see. They're inside of the car, and I can use these as the backstop to some of these openings. That's one way to do it. You'll see in the videos That's what Grant is doing with his cars. I found that the push and pull works just as well for the most part as well. So those are all those interior pieces I modeled. Alright, and then from there I finish this form. And to me is where the fun part comes in. And turn off my previous 3 steps. Have everything modeled, have all these cutouts, and then as I go along I can start to push and pull. I did a couple extra bodies, so I did the mirrors as a separate body. So I start to use these shapes to do a split face. It's going to get funny because I got some materials turned on, and press and pull. And once you do that, you'll see I can start to add some fillets. Even though it's a surface, you can actually apply a fillet and get nice rounded cutouts. So there I go, I'm just splitting the faces, applying fillets as I go along here. It's a little bit tedious, but it's fun. This is pretty easy because you can control it all. For the headlights, I did a separate model here. Let's see, this guy. I just used faces, and I did the snap so I could draw faces right on the car, and then I thickened it and I pushed it inside and applied a material to make it a light bulb. I also made sure not to delete this outside face. Alright, so here's me making all these cuts. And then I start to stitch the thing together, and I do that in the patch environment. So let's turn off some of these extra pieces here. Now I found it's good to not stitch too many things together. Just stitch what you really need to stitch together. And by stitch, I stitch everything that I want to come back and add an edge to. So this fillet only works if I've used the modify stitch. So stitch is taking faces that are adjacent to each other and stitching them together. So stitch, I can pick this body and then pick other sections to stitch to. And again, be conservative on that, only do stitching where you need to. So I've also come through, so you can see me going, working there and clearing this all up and creating all of these openings in the car. Then I've come through and created some extra sketches. So let me turn off some of these bodies we don't need anymore. And then here in these sketches, turn these on. See my sketches for the grill, all these openings. And then these sketches, line up the wheels. And then here, I've drawn some lines in to connect at the bottom of the wheels. And that's going to let me create a patch to fill in the bottom. That's not required, but it really helps with the rendering. It keeps light from coming in underneath the car. So that's create patch. The trick to that is uncheck enable chaining, so you can go around and select every edge, including this sketch. So it will follow a sketch line and part of your surface. You select that all the way around and it will make a nice patch for you. I also made patches behind these wheels as well. You'll see those turn on a little bit later as I get through this. So I'm doing a lot of reverse normaling. You can see if you see anything yellow, it's backwards to you. So you have to go into modify and reverse normal. There's the patch. Again, using this line, I put a patch behind each wheel so it's solid back there. Again, for rendering. So you can see all those pop in as I move through. There's another one. I reverse the normal to get it to be right. And there I go. From there, it's a little bit more splitting the bodies. I got a little bit tricky here. I'll zoom in a little bit. I did a sketch and I split the face to do doors and the hood. I did a double line sketch on those so I could push and pull to push in a little groove. And then I used the fillet command to finish that up. So there's the sketches for the doors. I did that for the door handle as well. A little spline sketch. And I used the offset command on the sketch to make it this groove. And I pushed and pulled to push that in, and then I used the fillet to round it off the top. Those are details that aren't required, but you can try that if you want to add some details. Those can be a little bit tough on your computer, processing all that. So I'm adding all the fillets here. They're really tiny, so you don't see them as I click through this, but adding fillets around the door and the hood. And those do make the computer think, so as I click through it, it has to think through each one of those. And then I've got it down to the finished car with all these little details.